The tax team isn't working a bazillion hours because we don't have a ton of other clients. We elected not to pick up those clients. We don't want the individual coming in to do a tax return. We turn those folks away. We don't want the business that wants us to do their tax return that doesn't want us to do anything else. We'll turn those folks away as well. And we only want to work with the clients that we are truly engaged with on that regular weekly or monthly basis.
If you'd like to earn CPE credit for listening to this episode, visit earmarkcpe.com. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Continuing education has never been so easy. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm Blake Oliver. I'm thrilled to have Jody Grunden joining me today on the podcast. Jody is an accounting visionary and pioneer who's been disrupting the profession for over 20 years. As the co-founder of Summit CPA Group and now head of the virtual CFO division at Anders CPAs Plus Advisors, Jody has helped introduce groundbreaking innovations, including the first virtual CFO model and subscription-based billing in the accounting profession. His firm provides strategic financial guidance and advisory services to help businesses maximize profits, improve cash flow, and create long-term wealth. Jody is passionate about changing the way clients in the industry think about accounting through value-driven relationships and technology. I can't wait to dig into this more with you, Jody, right now.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for Blake for having me on again. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Let's go back to the beginning. What inspired you? Well, I actually don't really know the origin of Summit all that well, and we don't have to go into tons of detail on this, but I'm curious. Like a lot of firms want to make this jump to advisory to virtual CFO.
Yep.
It's hard to get there because a lot of firms are still doing 90% compliance, right? Was that your firm when you started, or did you just go straight into advisory from the beginning? Take me back 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years ago. That's seems like it was just yesterday. So I'm pretty clear vision here. When I worked at a couple of large mid-sized accounting firms, Crow and BKD, both of which it was just one of those deals. There's a lot of things I didn't like about it. I didn't like the long hours. I actually physically got sick before busy season. It was just thinking about it, type of thing. And it just wasn't conducive of family life, especially if I was going to be coaching my kids in hockey and different sports and be part of their life during that dreaded tax season. And so I jumped out quickly and moved out of the public accounting, said it's not for me, and went into the corporate world. Worked for a $250 million manufacturing company, and it was one of those things that was great, exciting at first, new thing, big company, all the whistles and the bells and whistles and everything. And then about a year and a half into it, it got really boring. I mastered everything. I've learned everything. I fine-tuned everything. I made everything. Took a 45, 50-hour a week job and turned into 20, 25 hours by automating a lot of the stuff that the person was doing prior to me. And now I'm like, wow, now what do I do? And it got real boring. And so I thought, well, this isn't really long-term either. And so I thought, well, I made the wrong decision. Accounting isn't for me. What do I do? And I got an opportunity to run a firm with a small regional firm. And I thought, well, let me give it a shot. And so I left the corporate world, left public world, and kind of went back into the small accounting world. And I thought, well, let's try that. Learned pretty quickly that I am unemployable, and decided, hey, this isn't for me. I left that and started my own firm. And then with the idea of starting my own firm, I wanted to do things a lot differently. The things that I had learned in public accounting, I didn't want to repeat. I didn't want to do what was in the corporate world. The way that we made fun of the accountants when they came in. We joked around how the suits are coming in, who's going to take them out for lunch, all that kind of stuff. It was like, well, I didn't want to be that either. And so I jumped right in. Unfortunately, I had no money, so I bootstrapped it completely. I hired Adam right out of college at the other firm, and he came along with me eventually. And so he was my first employee. I had no money. I had no money in savings. It was truly a complete bootstrap. I live on credit cards, believe it or not, and rang up a huge bill on credit cards as I was trying to really get this off the ground. And tell you, it was a lot of stress. My kids, two brand new little kids. My wife just quit her job and started. She was a lawyer. She started her own law practice at the same time. She worked for a big law firm. And it was one of those things that is probably the wrong time to start, but it was the right time because we had no life preserver. We had nothing we could fall back on. We were going to make this work. And so, in starting out, I'm like, well, we have to do the traditional tax stuff, and I, went and got tax clients. Actually, the manufacturing company that I worked for, they wanted me to be their tax client. So that, it was a $30,000 tax gig at the time, and I was like, wow, this is great. I was able to get some seed money, pay Adam, my business partner, as we're going through. Read a lot of books. E-Myth was the big book that really got me thinking. It's a must read if you haven't read it and you're an entrepreneur mindset. And so I started off, and I thought, hey, how can we do things differently? But what happened is I jumped into the same old traditional stuff. I did the tax returns, I did write-up work, and it was like, I can't do this anymore. And about 2 years into it, I'm like, I got to make the change. And the first change I thought is, I can't be the bank. That was the big thing. I can't afford to be the bank. And so how am I going to change things so that I can't be the bank? And I thought, what if I just simply zap their bank account? It's like something crazy
Take the
like
money.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, take their money, so I don't have to argue about the money after the fact, or look at this bill and justify my bill every time. And so I thought, how can I do that? And I thought, well, the only way I could do that is if the price was set. It couldn't be an hourly bill thing where it changed all the time. It had to be a set price. And so I thought, well, how can I do that? And so I thought, well, let's take this, $10,000 tax return, and let's just divide it up into 12 equal payments. That's how I started off. And I thought, well, let's meet with the client monthly. They know what the equal payment is. I meet with them monthly. The tax return can't be that big a deal after I met with them all that time. And I thought, well, this is a great deal. So that's how I started. So I started, hey, let's do this monthly thing. And so I billed, but I still didn't zap their account yet. I did the invoicing thing. And I thought, well, meeting with them monthly, going through a monthly cadence, going over the historical financials, great. Well, it really didn't. It did a lot of things. The one thing it did do, it allowed me to do the tax return very quickly at the end of the year, because I'd already fixed everything throughout the year. Wasn't a mess. But it didn't really give me the satisfaction, really, of working with a client, because I was only talking about historical stuff, and you can only talk about that enough. The client still, it was hit and miss on whether they came to the meetings and that sort of thing. And so I thought, well, how can I turn this around to where the client really values it? And so I started then talking about, hey, let's look at cash flow. Let's talk about cash flow going forward. So we created this 13-week. Actually, I didn't create it. The $250 manufacturing company I worked with had this really elaborate spreadsheet that they used to determine cash. I thought, well, if I can mimic something like that and give that to a small firm, that'd be great. And so I did that, and the firm's like, wow, this is great. Things I thought were common sense. These small business owners are like, wow, this is great. This is like rocket science. And I'm like, wow, okay. And so I started then charging additional for it. And we met with the client on a monthly basis at the time, and we went through this 13-week cash flow. Every month we met with them, inflows, outflows, and they could really kind of help them guide their business. And what happened was the business owners were like, you know what? This is great, Jody. And Adam, because we were both doing it. I go, but we'd like to meet with you more often. Is that possible? I'm like, absolutely. Let's meet weekly. And so we jumped from a monthly meet, and then we jumped to a weekly meet. And at the same time, I thought, I can't be invoicing these clients all the time, because I'm going through cash. And and a lot of times they're a distressed business, and here I'm on the cash flow suite, right? I'm one of the expenses there. And so I thought, well, how can I get rid of that? So I thought, well, let's just simply ACH their account. Now we've got this flat fee. Let's ACH their account, and and we'll go forward with that. Believe it or not, clients did not push back at all. They actually loved the idea. They did not have to cut us a check. They didn't have to bill it. They just loved it. It was like, well, and to our surprise, we thought, well, most clients aren't going to like this. They're going to push back, all this kind of stuff. No one did. And it was amazing. And so after that, we're like, you know what? We're going to make this part of our deal. We're not even going to give clients the option going forward. And from there on, we never gave them the option. Here's how we do it. We ACH their account. At that time, it was monthly, on a monthly basis for the predetermined dollar amount, and no pushback. I would say probably in 20 years, maybe 2 or 3 clients asked about it, and we said, no, this is how we do it. And that was the conversation, which is kind of funny, because that was a big fear of ours. We wouldn't pick clients up. And, with that, so
well, and that's the big resistance I hear when I tell people, hey, ACH your clients on the first of the month, every month.
Mm-hmm.
The common objection is, oh, my clients won't do that. I will not be able to do that because they won't let me, or it will turn away people. But you're saying you got no pushback.
No pushback at all. Even for the clients that we had, I would say we had about 50 of them convert right away. No issues at all. The other 50 were like, no, I like the old way we're doing it. And so we kept them on with that, as long as they're making their payments. And eventually, guess what? they did the ACH eventually too, to where we have nobody. And I'd say probably 4 years into the deal, nobody cutting us a check. We didn't have to go to the bank. We didn't have to go to the mailbox anymore. We didn't have to wait and worry about
Yeah.
not having a cash flow problem, as a small business owner, because we got our payments all the time and made cash flow a ton easier. Fast forward till we grew it to a $10 million firm before we merged. Think about that. $10 million firm with zero accounts payable or accounts receivable.
Yeah.
Kind of made, actually, we had negative accounts receivable because we got our money before we actually, performed the service, which is pretty unreal.
No more credit card debt for you after that.
Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
took me out of the credit card debt super quick. Yeah, it was one of those things I had to figure things out,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how life rolled with me throughout the whole process. Something would pop in, and instead of just accepting it, I'm like, well, how can we make this better? How can we figure this out? What's out there? A tool, a process, people, whatever that might be that we can actually figure this out and change it. Just because it's been done that way forever doesn't mean it's going to be going, that's how it's going to be going, forward. And that's kind of how we did with our model. We went from a monthly model, we moved it to a weekly model to where we're
Yeah.
actually meeting with clients on a weekly basis. And then we're like, why are we actually ACHing them monthly if we're meeting with them weekly? We thought, let's just ACH them weekly. And with that, again, no pushback. Clients loved it. The nice thing about it, which we kind of didn't even think about, was when clients leave, there was no, hey, you owe me 2 months back, or there was, or you had to leave at the end of the month because that's when it was nothing like that. When they wanted to leave, they just let us know, and then it's boom, it's off the next week. Which is the nice thing about it, it doesn't happen very often. We get 10% churn a year, and a lot of that churn is due to the clients actually selling their business and moving on, type of thing. But the other thing was that when we had scope changes, so we had build in our model that if we had scope changes, the CFO can just make that change right away, and it's effective the very next week. So it's not waiting to the end of the month or making adjustments. It was just so much easier to administer. It was great for our team because it saved our team a ton of time, and it also saved the clients, a ton of anguish, I guess, if you want to call it, or postponement because they weren't sure how we're going to bill. I didn't want billing to be an issue with anything, and I took that
Yep.
issue completely out of the ballpark.
There's so many things that I love about how you set this up, and I just want to highlight those for our listeners because I think it's so important. And I have never met another CPA firm that does it this way. And I feel like it was quite key to your success in many
Mhm.
ways, got you to 10 million, got
Mhm.
you acquired, merged into Anders, like
Mhm.
very successful. And I don't know why more people don't do this. And what I love about it is that you aligned the ACH pull with the deliverable. So if you met with them monthly, you were billing them monthly. And if you met with them weekly, you're charging them. You're not billing, you're just pulling
Mhm.
weekly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gave you this connection with your clients. I mean, imagine that meeting weekly made a huge difference for you in terms
Oh,
of
yeah.
like having better relationships with your clients, getting more
Mhm.
work from them.
Yep.
I saw on your website that you have hundreds of clients,
Mhm.
and to get to 10 million with hundreds of clients means that you must be having big engagements with those clients.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of funny because right now we have about 220 clients, and we'll do about $13 million in revenue this year. And so our average clients roughly, I'd say an average new client we pick up is between $80 and $90,000 a year engagement. And so if
80
you 80
to
to
90,
$90,000 a year, yeah. Yeah.
and you're billing them weekly.
Yeah, we bill them weekly. We bill all of our clients weekly, and we close about 40% of our opportunities. And so, it's not like it's not like we're getting 1 out of 10 and that are willing to go this route. We're getting 40% or more. And if we lowered our price or did something like that, we could probably get a lot more. But the idea is that we want to work with a smaller number of clients and be able to give them a better service and better experience because there's only so many great quality people out there that you can be a great consultant, a good accountant, and so forth. And we want to make sure that we're capitalizing on that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me want to build this. I want to copy you, Jody, because I'm thinking to myself, you've got hundreds of clients and you've built this $10 million or more
Mhm.
practice. And we know there's something like 40,000 mid-market sized businesses in this country.
Mhm.
There's at least tens of thousands of businesses that could utilize this type of
Oh yeah.
service, that could need it. And it's
Hmm.
probably all of those that where they're looking at the other option is hire somebody in-house.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
when you come in at 80 to 90 a
Hmm.
year, like, you're very competitive with the cost of hiring somebody and then all the benefits, and then what if they
Hmm.
leave?
Yep.
Is
Yeah, and we even scaled it too. So we scaled it so that if you're a smaller company, let's say a $2 million company, you're going to pay on average lower because it scales up based on revenue size. So if you're a $100 million company, you're going to pay more. And so, our average client we find is about a $5 million company, somewhere in that ballpark, and we pick them up as low as 2 million and as high as I think 70 million is our biggest client. Now, I'd say the average is between that 5 and 10 is what a typical client ends up being, and it scales really well because they not only get a CFO, but in a lot of cases, they may spend a little bit more in the engagement. Maybe they get an accounting department with them or a tax person if they want us to do their tax stuff. So we can add all these different services and different opportunities for the client, and it's just a fraction of what they would typically pay an in-house person. And again, you're rolling the dice on an in-house person, so it's not with nowadays. It's really hard to find somebody that's super great, understands the industry, understands accounting, and can deliver a service level performance thing.
and it'll stay longer than a year or two.
Yeah, it'll stay long. That's exactly right. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Hmm.
Yeah, when I was in the outsourced accounting team at Armanino, a good
Hmm.
number of our clients would come to us desperate because their controller or accounting manager had given notice, and we would have 2 weeks to go in there, usually only a week by the time we signed the engagement letter, to go in there and download their knowledge and try to either do it ourselves or transmit it to somebody else. It was always a
Yeah.
huge
Hmm.
I mean, I could see the fear on the CFO's face
Hmm.
when that
Yeah.
happened, and yeah. And often there wouldn't be a CFO, it would be some VP or the owner who was responsible for it because they weren't big enough at, 5 to 10 million to
Hmm.
to have that role necessarily.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we've got it set up where we have an onboarding team that actually goes in and handles that. So their job is to go in, get all that historical knowledge that we can possibly grasp from the exiting person, or if that person's not there, we can grab from whatever source we can, and really build everything within a 6 to 12 month period or 6 to 12 week period to really get that client going. From a forecast, KPI, making sure their financials are all in order, and really kind of getting the cadence and all the bells and whistles that we offer as a service. They've got a short period of time to do it, and you're right. A lot of times it's like an oh heck moment. Here we are. What do we do now?
Yeah. So I wanna dig into what exactly you do for your
Hmm.
typical client on a weekly basis.
Sure.
You mentioned the 13-week cash flow as the
Hmm.
first thing you started doing. That was
Yep.
you were billing monthly, you were meeting monthly, but you started doing a 13-week cash flow, and that's what inspired you sounds like that's what inspired the weekly meetings to go over that.
Yep.
So, do you do the 13-week cash flow for all your clients?
Yeah, great question. So I can give you some ballparks here. So we out of the 220 clients that we work with, 80% of them we're actually providing what we call a CFO level service, or controller level service. With that 50%, it's closer to 55%. We do the 13-week cash flow. So we actually meet with them. We during that 13-week cash flow, we're actually it depends upon who's doing the accounting. If they're doing the accounting, paying the bills and so forth, we're meeting with that accountant. It's usually a senior level accountant on our sides, meeting with their person. We're going over, hey, here's what's expected to come in. Here's the bills we recommend paying. Here's what your look is. Sometimes if it's a business owner, it's in that meeting. Depends really on the size of the company, right? And so about I'd say 50%, 55% we do that for. With our client base, 80% of our clients, we actually do their tax stuff for. Usually starts out at about 60% when we close the engagement. And then within about a few months, we're like, hey, why don't you just do our taxes too? That's kind of how it ends up. So about 80% is what we typically end up with our tax return. We'll pay bills for about 30% of our clients, so not as significant. We don't do a whole lot of invoicing or AR. It's about 10% of our clients. And I'd say 10% we do payroll management. So we let the Gustos of the world take care of the payroll itself, the processing, and we will handle the payroll management for about 10%. And so and then we reconcile or oversee the reconciliation the bank accounts and so forth for just about all of our clients. And so that's an important process. Internal controls, whether we're doing or they're doing, we want to look over to make sure everything looks and feels good. And I'd say the majority of our clients, we close the books at the end of the month. And so we'll make the month-end journal entries, close the books, make sure everything's tied in. And then from there, 80% of our clients fall in that bucket where we're actually providing a forecasting, a forecast for them. So we'll do not only a 13-week, which is a separate meeting all by itself, but we have, in that separate meeting, I don't include that in the weekly touch meeting. So that's a meeting that's held 30 minutes, the cash flow meeting, 30 minutes, usually with a bookkeeper, accountant, they're answering accounting questions, that sort of thing. And that's on a weekly basis, right? And so then in addition to that, our CFO will meet with the leadership team, usually part of a leadership meeting. And they'll meet and they'll go through the forecast. And the forecast is super dynamic. And the forecast usually is based upon what the owner's end results are. So we always look at the end and then back into it, right? And so if they want to exit in 3 years, we're looking, hey, what's the value that we need to build it to in 3 years? And we'll back into, okay, here's what we need in order to get to that exit point, or whatever that might be. And so we take a lot of pride, I guess, making sure that we are basically the stewardship of their forecast, because that's the main reason why people come to us. It's not because of the accounting. There's a ton of firms out there that can do accounting. They come to us because they want that person to be able to sit alongside them and kind of really help them drive the financial, side of the ship, which is one of the most important things in order to make, everything, all the bells and whistles to work. So the forecast to me is super important. It was super, super, super important when it came to COVID. When we had the COVID issue for over a year, we met with clients at no additional cost. We said, hey, we'll meet with you as often as you want. So we were meeting many times, 2 or 3 times a week, going through modeling and different scenarios with clients. Hey, what if we lose this client? This client's delaying significantly. How's that going to impact cash? Because our forecast isn't dialed into just the revenue and expense side. It's dialed into the cash side. That's the most important part of it. What does the cash position look like in December? We're 3 months away. How many people out here know? What we know, our clients know, they know what's going to be in January, February, and March. And it's not based on, our forecast is never based on a percentage, like meaning, hey, we're going to increase sales miraculously by 10%. Never, it's never done that way. It's always based on, hey, we need to, if it's a service base, we need to have X amount of people. They need to be utilized X amount. Their average bill rate needs to be X amount. And then we scaled out based on their capacity. Then we look at their pipeline, which is a separate meeting. And we look at their pipeline and determine, hey, do we have the capacity, do we have the contract capacity to be able to service this great model we just put together? Because we can put the best model in the world up here, but if we don't have the sales pipeline to back it up, well, it's no good. And so that pipeline we're always looking at the next 3 months out. We're adjusting the forecast based on those 3 months, up or down. So it could be that, hey, we're gonna increase. We're going to have 3 solid months on our forecast. Then we get to our pipeline meeting and it's like, ooh, scale it back down. So maybe not as solid as we thought, so our bank account's not going to be as high as we thought. Or it could be the opposite. It could be like, man, we're going to blow these next 3 months away. Then it's like, okay, so now we got a decision to make. Do we hire people? Do we hire contractors? How do we fill that? Do we stretch our people just to get it done? So those are the kind of decision-making things that we bring up. We don't make the decision. We never make the decision. We're always the ones kind of informing, hey, here's the decision you need to make. And so then they'll say, yeah, let's hire 3 people. What does that look like in the model now? And so we'll put 3 people in there and it's like, oh, now we got sales capacity even more, our capacity in our forecast more. Do we have the sales to back it up? We do. And then we continue on, and it's kind of rinse and repeat thing. And so clients just love the forecasting meeting. They come to the forecasting meeting that they want to see exactly where we're at. And so we'll either do that with our clients on a weekly basis, or if it's a monthly client, we'll do it once a month with the client. But for the most part, clients, they're going to be touching that forecast on a weekly basis. I mentioned the pipeline, which is another meeting that we meet with, and we're going through capacity. We're basically looking at what they have under contract and their sales. We're looking at, what's their pipeline look at? What's the percentage of close opportunities? How, what does it truly look like in order for, and this, I'm talking service based, of course. What does it truly look like in order to, manage that? And then the other one we look at is revenue recognition. So as we close the month out, we're making sure that all the invoice, when it's kind of funny. People think that cash is the best or accrual is the best or whatever it is. We strongly believe in accrual and accrual accounting. And the reason being is because all of our KPIs match revenues. We want to make sure it matches identical. Otherwise, it's going to throw things off. And so revenue rec is super important. So if they're invoicing once a month or whatever, we don't care. We want to make sure, again, it's tied in perfectly. And so we dive deep into that revenue rec with the client, making sure, hey, here's how we're doing it. If we've got a job that's spread over, a year, we're breaking it up based on contract capacity. We're breaking up all these, percentage of completion, whatever it is, we're breaking it up so that we know exactly when the time is put in there. And so that's a key function to it. And so the clients really get a good understanding of, that importance there. And so revenue rec, a huge important one. We do the financial statements, we do the pipeline. And then, from there on, it's just simply ad hoc meetings. Again, we're part of that leadership team meeting, and that's how we present it to a client. So and that's one of the big questions we ask all of our prospects, hey, how often do you meet? They don't meet very often at all. That's kind of a red flag to us. And it's like, well, we have to meet weekly, or if they get the monthly contract, we have to meet at least, twice a month. And if they can't do that, then they're probably not a good client. So there's some situations there, but I would say 90% of the people we talk to, they're meeting weekly with a leadership team meeting of some sort. And so we're like, well, we want to be part of that meeting, not to take the meeting over, but just to kind of be the financial ears in that meeting and be able to, be part of the strategy. And that's the big part of that weekly meeting or weekly cadence is that we are part of the thinking of the company. So we're not being reactive like a lot of accounts where they're hearing things for the first time after they've done it. We are in that discussion, hey, let's hire a biz dev person. And then all of a sudden, you're looking at, next month, you're like, hey, who's this person? I didn't know, you can't afford that person. It's more, no, at that point, you're making that call then. It's like, hey, let's look at the forecast. Let's make that decision. Yeah, great. We can eat into our cash reserve a little bit and grab it. Here's what we expect that person is going to generate additional revenue for us. So we can make those, financial recommendations, just be that sounding board on the finance side.
That is something I didn't anticipate you saying, that you don't just have a separate financial meeting every month to go over the forecast. You're actually in the leadership meetings with everybody else in that company as the CFO there every week.
Yep.
And that's ideal, right? That it's every week you're in that meeting. So you're not hearing about stuff after the fact. You're actually in the discussion when they're talking about hiring or when they're talking about making a business model change or.
Yeah, it's when we say strategy, that's what we mean. That we're part of that decision making. We're not going to come with the magic bullet every meeting. That'll never happen. We help them form their decisions, and that's the strategy part versus more of a reactive part, which we do offer that service as well, where it's meeting with you twice a month. But again, we're hearing things second nature, and the client's paying less money for it. We're meeting with them less. It's more of a traditional type of approach to accounting with the forecasting twist to it.
Got it. Either way, you are maintaining a forecast.
Correct.
And that forecast is driver based. So it's not just percentage increases. You're actually linking up hiring to salaries expense.
Exactly. If they're repairing cars, how many cars are going through a month? What's the average car repair? How many people do we have servicing those cars? All that stuff is there. And the reason why we do it that way is because an owner cannot control a percentage increase. Nobody on this call knows how to control a percentage increase. The way you control a percentage increase is you break it down to something they can control, the non-financial drivers. And for a repair shop, it would be cars. If I was doing it for a baseball, just something very simple, maybe a baseball academy, it would be, well, how many people are coming through? How much is their membership? When does their membership hit? Because you can't just divide their membership equally over 12 months. It all hits in August. That revenue's got to come in August, or how many times they use the tunnels, batting tunnels or softball batting tunnels or whatever. When does that typically happen? Well, it doesn't happen these 3 months. It happens these 9. And so you got to really be strategic on when you're putting things in there, when the revenue is truly going to hit, and then matching up those expenses accordingly. And that's the key to a dynamic forecast, because what happens with a dynamic forecast, what happens with the static forecast, and everybody's used to that, right? You make them in November, December, you compare yourself to them all year round, and if you're not hitting it, you're disappointed every single month because you can't hit it.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
more often
or
than
you're
not, it totally diverges from reality very quickly.
yeah. Oh, the first month, right? Our
Yeah.
forecast, which is kind of weird because when we joined with Anders, that was the biggest thing that they had a hard time grasping was because they did the static budget. You know, hey, here's where it's at. Why are you not there? Why are you there? And it's like our very first week, our budget's completely screwed. We're either going to really excel or we're not going to excel because again, we are a subscription base. So if we pick clients up in January, if we pick let's say we figured, hey, we're going to pick up 50 clients for the year. That's what we're targeting. You know, and we kind of spread it out equally throughout the year because we don't know when we're going to pick these clients up, right? And we just happen to pick up 50 in January. It looks like we are going to like blow the year away, and we don't have to pick up another client right the rest of the year. And because we've got 12 months of 50 in there, that's a lot different than having 12 months of 3 clients, 11 months of 3 clients, 10 months of 3 clients, and so forth. And the same goes the opposite. If we picked up 0 clients from January through November and then picked up 50 in December, well, we picked up 50. High five, we got our 50 target. But guess what? Our year is shot because we've got 11 months with no revenue. And then we've got 1 month with only 1/12 of an annual client. And so it's a
Yeah.
you know what I mean, it's a different it's
Yeah.
a different concept that we have to undertake as a CPA firm, but we understand that we need to make sure that we apply that to our clients in the same manner.
Where did you learn to do this driver-based modeling? Was that in your industry job? You said it was like a 250 million, was it
Yeah,
a
$250
construction
million
company?
dollar manufacturing company. No, it wasn't. It was just it just came naturally. It was like, you know, because when we started doing the forecasting with them, you know, it was like, well, you know, that we had to talk their terms. We had to come up with something that they could have control over. And that's when we started it. It was like, you know, it just kind of came naturally from the very beginning, you know, to be honest with you. I don't know, I might have read it in a book. I have no idea where it truly came from, but we did that from day one. It was first of all, it was tangible products because we had, you know, our repair shops, we had baseball, we had all these smaller companies when we first started. And then once we actually started dealing with ourselves, we realized how an accounting firm works. Everybody understands that, hopefully on this call. And then from there, you could apply that really to any service-based industry, you know, and that was the key there. Because when we picked up our first true virtual CFO company, which was out of Rhode Island, here we were located in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Rhode Island's like a pretty good distance to be able to commute back and forth for a weekly phone call or a weekly meeting. It was kind of nice to be able to really kind of experiment on that. And they were a creative agency at that point. They had 60 people. They were fully remote, didn't have an office, and it was like, well, this is great. Now we can figure out how to make this work. And we applied the principles that we understood already in the accounting to apply them in the same manner that we would for them. And so it was just one of those things that it just made sense. It was like I wasn't sure why people would do it any other way, and that's just the way we did it. And then to find out that it's probably not the norm. It wasn't the norm at the time, and we benefit from it, I guess.
Let's talk about staffing, how you
Mhm.
staff these engagements. Now, I know you said you have on the small end maybe a client that does 2 million, on
Yeah,
the high end a client that does 70, but it seems like most of them fall into that 5 to $10 million revenue range.
correct.
So,
Yep,
let's say you've got one of those clients and they're doing the weekly CFO, virtual CFO services, so they're, you're in their monthly or you're in their weekly leadership team meeting.
yep.
Um, do you have one person doing everything, or do you have, like, a group of people that serve that client? How does it work?
Yeah, we went from a long time. We went the team approach, and the reason why I went the team approach, it kind of stemmed out of the fact that hey, I had to get out of doing the CFO stuff, you know, because I was Adam and I were the CFOs. We were it, you know, we were the owners of the company. You know, we were the CFOs. How do we get us out? And so we had other people attend the meetings with us, and with that, and kind of learn how we talk to people because it's a different skill set. It's not every accountant
Mhm.
is made to be a CFO, be a consultant, and it was a different skill set, and so we had a lot of redundancy built into our model to begin with, and it wasn't super profitable, but it was a learning curve we actually had to do. And with that, it just became that it was just so easy that I could give something to the person that was in the call and say, "Hey, can you create this model for me?" And it allowed me to do other things. It allowed me to to be more of a consultant and allow that person to do the data crunching and the day stuff. And I knew I needed to know how to do that, of course, but it allowed me to get away and again do other things. And so we thought, this model is working really well. Let's go ahead and just kind of make it more of a team approach. And so eventually we added a team to it. So it was more of a CFO ahead of the engagement, that the person is meeting with the client on a weekly, monthly basis, depending upon the engagement. And it's pretty split. It's probably split 50% of the clients that person will work with on a monthly deal, so maybe 1 or 2 times a month. And then 50% they'll work with weekly. So it's kind of a split deal. They'll do about $2 million booked. So I'd say about 1.4 million is where we want that CFO to actually be able to manage effectively, which, depending upon how many clients and the size, and so that's going to vary per engagement. And then under that, then we have what we call a senior level advisor. And the senior level advisor is the person that's actually putting the forecast together, crunching the numbers. They're on the engagement with the CFO on most of their calls. They're making sure that the financials are uploaded into our reach reporting dashboarding features, so that the clients can actually utilize dashboarding, and they're kind of the go-between. So if a client can't get a hold of the CFO for some reason, they're going to call that senior level advisor as kind of the backup person. And so then from there, if the client has us do accounting, then we've got an actual accounting team that does that, where we have somebody that's doing the payables and receivables, somebody that's doing that's doing the payroll if they want us to do payroll, whatever a la carte feature they want us to do. We've got a department that does that. So we could have 3 different folks there. And then we have some folks over in India. We have some folks in Mexico, Philippines that help us do some of the other functions that we have. And then our tax team, which is completely separate from the accounting team, they'll do the taxes at the end of the year for our team. And so they only do taxes for the basically the ones that we actually do CFO or controller services for. And so it's limited on who they do. But the nice part about that is that those tax folks, they meet with our clients on a quarterly basis to go over a soft tax planner with them, to go over hard tax planner towards the end of the year. And so the way that we've got it structured is that, our accounting team is not interrupted with the busy season because they're not part of it. The tax team isn't working a bazillion hours because we don't have a ton of other clients. We elected not to pick up those clients. We don't want the individual coming in to do a tax return. We turn those folks away. We don't want the business that wants us to do their tax return that doesn't want us to do anything else. We'll turn those folks away as well. And we only want to work with the clients that we are truly engaged with on that regular weekly or monthly basis. And it just makes the flow so well that our tax team, maybe during tax season, work 50, maybe 55 hours a week, just a couple weeks out of the year, but nothing significant. Most of the time they're working 40 to 45. Our CFOs, they manage a $1.4 million book. They may work with 20 clients, and they're probably working 40 to 45 hours a week. Nothing too stressful. And then the accounting team underneath them, they're working typically 40 hours a week. That's kind of the model, the way the model was, which was completely different than what I grew up in the public accounting, where we killed everybody from January through March or April, and then they had a lower tax, lower commitment the rest of the year. I didn't like that model. It was too stressful for me, and I had to create something that was a lot different. And this is the kind of the model that we created. So to answer your question, it's a team approach all the time. We never just have one person on any engagement. And with that, the nice thing about that is that if one person on the team has to leave, wins the lottery, whatever, we can slide somebody else in and not lose all of the knowledge that was built up during that engagement.
Yeah, I love that you're not killing your team all year. Well, or not the whole busy season. 50, 55 hours is very doable for a few weeks in the year. And with, probably 200 clients that you're doing the taxes for, that's much more manageable than thousands of returns that a lot of teams are drowning in. Right.
Yeah.
And you're collecting it quarterly.
Yeah. So the financials are typically in really good shape when it comes to putting the tax returns together. Ideally with AI, that would be great if that would cause us to reduce the time our tax people are doing during tax season, because we've already got a solid product going into it with maybe a few adjustments in January, but not a ton. So it's not like you're looking at a financial statement, you see all the depreciation hitting in 1 month, December. It's spread equally throughout, it's adjusted throughout as, things are, all the stuff should be tied up and done. to where the tax team was just simply taking that and rolling it through. I would say probably the biggest thing they spend their most of their time on are the multi-state returns. Because I would say 80% of our clients have multi-states. They're in multi-states. And so that's probably the biggest chunk of their time is spent, handling that.
Oh yeah, because you gotta allocate the revenue and
Yep.
that's I've had to do that before because I had a
Yeah.
virtual firm. I mean, I
Yeah.
imagine that Summit has to do a lot of multi-state
Oh yeah,
stuff, right?
I think we're involved in probably 30 to 40 states that we actually have revenue coming from. Yeah, so we file just about all the states. Yeah, it's a bummer.
Cost of doing business when you are a remote firm, and we haven't even
Yeah,
touched
yeah,
on that yet. Why don't
yeah.
we do that with the time we
Yeah.
have left? You started doing remote. Was that at the inception? Like when or you were going
No.
to somebody's office?
Yeah, initially we had the brick and mortar office. I actually owned the building because I always told clients at the beginning, I'm like, hey, it's a really good idea to own the building that you're in. Yeah, that was the biggest thing. And then it was fast forward 10 years after I started. It's like we don't own the building anymore. We don't actually have people in the
We
building
don't have a building
now.
anymore.
Yeah, now what's because what happened was, when you think about it, the building really kept us the building actually helped made the building made strategic decisions for us not knowing it. And what I mean by that is that we had 18 folks. We're like, okay, so we've got room for 3 more before we have to actually build something. So now what? And so then it was like, okay, so slow that down. We can't grow that fast. We got to build this building. What do we do here? And so the building was causing us to make decisions, good or bad. And when in 2000, I think it was 11, when we picked up our first what we call true virtual CFO firm in Rhode Island. They just happened to never have had an office. Basically, that was the only thing they've ever had. And with that, the nice thing about it was that we learned so much from them. What works, what doesn't work, how they do their meetings, how they communicate back and forth. Are they successful? Highly successful, high revenue driven. They're probably a $10 million company, 60 folks, and it was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I would love to try this. And, with that, I'm not risk adverse. I love taking risks, but I want to make sure that everything's calculated. Nothing's ever going to be perfect before I jump in, ever. I'm going to take that risk, and nothing can really be perfect when you take a risk. And so, I thought, hey, this would be a great opportunity to see what we can do, and if we could hire people outside of just Fort Wayne, Indiana, because really you're kind of limited in the geographic location where you're going to hire people. And I thought, hey, this could be a great opportunity. And I thought, so I went to our meetings. We had 18 folks at the time. I owned the building. There were stand-up meetings, so that it was, I did everything that everybody, every book I read, and I always start off with a joke. And so all my meetings ever start off with a joke. And even our meetings today start with a joke. And with that, I didn't really think of the joke, and I said, "Hey, I got this great idea. We're going to go remote." And everybody's like waiting for the punchline, and then the punchline didn't happen, and it was complete silence. And it was like, back 18 years ago. Well, yeah, back in 2013 is when I actually did it. They're like, "What do you mean? We can't go remote. We got to collaborate. We got to do this. We got to do that." And I'm like, well, why can't we do it if we're doing it to our clients? We're remote on our clients team. Why can't we do it? And it's like,
Yep.
well, because internet's not good, because I got kids, because all the personal reasons why they couldn't do it come out. And I'm like, wow, I completely had out of the 18 people, I had 2 people thought it was a great idea. Even my business partner Adam thought it was a horrible idea. He had 5 kids at home, and there's just no way. And with that. I'm like, well, I can't lose the team. So let me go ahead and just do this. I'm going to go ahead and really remodel the office for 30 people because we'll never get more than 30 people, right? Fast forward, we had 50 people 3 years later. And, and I'm going to make it so nice that they're going to just love this office. TVs, big office space, big cubes, everything. And I kicked everybody out for 6 weeks. And construction probably took a little longer than that. And it was like one by one, they came to me and said, man, I really like this work from home idea, because I forced them to work from home because I gutted the entire place. And it was like one by one. I'd say 14 out of the 18 people were like, you know what? I want to work from home. I'm like, you're kidding me. I just spent $100,000. What are you talking about? You want to work from home? And
That was the price of the experiment.
That was the price, and it worked out well. And when you fast forward to the pandemic, the exact same things happened. People were like, hey, I can't do this, and all of a sudden, oh, I can do this. This does work. For the folks that it didn't work. Well, it's because the processes and technology wasn't conducive. They didn't have, they weren't ready for it. Whereas with us, we had the opportunity to learn from somebody that was doing it for 2 years, and then we jumped in and we actually started implementing a lot of what they had done. And man, it worked out really well. Our clients had no issues with it at all. They didn't care. The bank was kind of funny about it. They're like, because they actually got a loan once. They're like, they sent somebody out, and they're like, "Where's all your people?" And they're like, "Well, they're all across the United States." And like, "What are you talking about?" Because it wasn't a thing. We were one of the first 125 companies in the world to go remote, and the company that we learned from was probably one of the first 25 companies. And so it was just a super new concept, and it was pretty neat. It solved a ton of issues. It kind of opened the floodgates on the opportunities to hire really quality talent, which was the biggest thing. It wasn't quantity of talent; it was quality. I can be picky and choosy on who I wanted to bring on. When we actually introduced the fact that we're remote, we're actually going through and we market through the website, through tons of content marketing and everything. We've always done that. And with that, it opened the floodgates where we had in the first week. Well, actually, Forbes came out and interviewed us, and that's how I know we're one of the top 25, because they put us in this big article with listed everybody. It was like Apple and Microsoft and Summit CPA Group and Dell. It's like, well, how did this happen? I was like by far the smallest on that list, and we had probably 2,000 resumes hit our inbox probably within a day and a half.
Wow.
It was unreal. And it was from partners from accounting firms. I mean, we're talking high quality people. And we had to figure out another process. Now, how do we deal with that? I can't open up every resume that comes in to look for somebody. And so we had to put processes in place in order to manage even that small thing, which was nice. And so it worked out really well. The remote thing's awesome. We've been doing it. And you fast forward here to the merger with Anders. They're a fully brick and mortar team in St. Louis that I would say probably half their people are working remote in some fashion, whether it's 3 days a week or 2 days a week or whatever. Our service line is 100% remote. And so we've got, I'd say 100%, we're kind of hybrid now, because we've got about 14 or 15 folks that were originally in that office. That's part of our virtual CFO service line that's still in the office 2 or 3 days a week. But the remainder is spread, all from East Coast to West Coast, Michigan to Minnesota to Texas, all over the place.
And even though this is a merger, you're not losing the Summit CPA name. You've kept that.
Yeah, so we kept that. So the deal that we made with them is that we would gradually lose that over time. And so because and the reason being is because we do a lot of marketing, and our marketing, we spend about 7 to 11% of our annual revenue in marketing. And so that tells you
7 to 11%.
7 to 11%. Yeah. And we've done that from the very beginning, because I used to be in sales a long time ago. I was a Cutco rep. I was the knife person. I sold knives, and I did it for 3 years. Loved it.
Oh my gosh, Jody, you gotta do that at a conference someday. Just like show up with the knives.
And put them right out in front.
Yeah, and it'll be like Joshua Bell playing in the subway station. We'll have to do
right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually loved it, but I understood that it's super hard, and I didn't want to do that on a regular basis. I didn't want to go out and have to fight for every client, because when you think about it, we offered a very different service that nobody had heard about. We're offering it virtually now, and so how do you go door to door? How do you go business to business? And how do you target different companies when you're actually nationwide now, and not just simply looking for businesses in your area? And so content marketing was the only way of doing it. And back then, there was no such thing. We were blogging every day, and we've been blogging daily probably for 10, 15 years. And we write a ton of content in addition to that.
You've got your own podcast. We got to mention that. Shout out to your podcast. What do you have going right now?
Yeah, we've got 3 podcasts going on right now. We've got the virtual CFO success show, which is geared more towards creative agencies. We got the modern, which is helping out CPA firms, modern CPA success show, helping out CPA firms and kind of giving insights to what we're doing here. And then we have one for young professionals. So we've got, people just love the idea of the websites and listening to it. But the music, or the best part about it is that our writers can take the content that's on those websites and repurpose those for YouTube videos, for
Hmm.
articles. There's a lot of great things that they can do, not only just from the content they get from those, but it's a great repurposing thing. And so we use it for a lot of things. Get the word out there as a thought leader, but also repurposing it to even become more of a thought leader through content marketing.
Yeah. Well, I'm biased, but I'm a huge fan of podcasts as a
Yeah,
way to
yeah,
generate content because,
yep,
you and I can just get on here and talk,
yep.
and it's so easy for subject matter experts to talk about what they're doing or their firm or
Mhm.
something they're doing every day. Whereas if I asked you to sit down, Jody, and write about it, how long would it take you? It would
Oh,
never
it was
happen.
brutal. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
brutal. Yeah, because I did that because for a long time I would take the first 2 hours of my day and that'd be writing. The most brutal 2 hours in the world, and client stuff would always take precedence. So it became that I would actually I'd earmark 2 hours a day, and I would maybe write for half an hour. And you're right. And so I had to you
Yeah.
have to get and I think the key to that is you have to really get good people to help you do the writing. And so I have from the very beginning, I had contractors that helped me write. They'd interview me. They would ask me questions. They would write an article. I would then proof it and make changes to it, and boom, it was great. And that was so much quicker than me trying to do it myself, and so much quicker if they've got something they can look at versus now me actually interviewing every day. They just all these different podcasts I'm on. They'll hop on and they'll put 2 or 3 articles just from this podcast alone. Out in the ether there.
You were on a podcast with Brandon Poe, going
Hmm.
back to this merger with Anders. And
Hmm.
you mentioned on that show that you had been approached by a number of top 50 firms
Yep.
about joining.
Hmm.
So, what made you decide to pick Anders instead of any of these other
Yeah, that's a
opportunities?
great question because it was kind of funny because you and I were on a podcast together, and we were talking about it, and I couldn't tell you. I was under an NDA, so I was like, it was horrible. It was like you were asking me
Oh,
such. I'm like,
right. Yeah, I remember
oh, do
that.
you know anything about this podcast? It was one of those things that it just continued. I was like, this is so coincidental. But we got approached by a ton of PE firms. We got approached by a ton of accounting firms, really large accounting firms, to really I wouldn't say small, but I'd say mid-size and so forth. And we were always open to talk. And I always told people that I'm open to talk. I just wanted to hear what they had to say because my vision was, hey, I really didn't want to sell the firm until we got to 20 million. And we've been growing so fast, we've doubled our size every 3 years. And so that's our growth pattern. Add a 20 to 25% profit margin at the bottom, which is unheard of. Most companies that are in this are growing maybe fast, but no margin or low margin. And we were growing with a good profit margin. So that was a good thing. So everything was in our favor going into this. And with that, like I said, we at the time we were actually talking to 3 different CPA firms at one time, and not interested in selling. We're just kind of listening because I knew that, hey, it's going to be about 3 years before I truly want to sell. And so because we'd be at the 20 million mark. And so Anders approached us. They heard me on at Engage. I was at Engage speaking at on one of the panels. I also write for CPA Trendlines, and so they saw an article there or articles there, and I was approached and said, hey, we'd like to talk. I'm like, sure, no problem. And so I spoke with them, and initially I wasn't super excited. I wasn't even sure I was going to go with a second time around, to be honest with you. And I thought, you know what, Adam hasn't had a chance. Let me have Adam be in this conversation, and so we met with Dave Hartley at Anders, and it was like, wow, this dude's pretty cool. I like him. I can relate to him. He came off very genuine, somebody that I felt I could communicate with. And I thought, well, this could lead to something. And so we met Robert, the managing partner, Robert Minkler, and I was like, wow, this guy is also really cool, And so it was like they met the cool test, which to me, a lot of them were all in suits and stuff like that. These guys were in,
Yeah.
casual dress.
Well,
They must have read or heard me talk about it.
and for our listeners that haven't seen Jody in person or aren't watching this on YouTube, Jody is famous for showing up in the Hawaiian shirts and really just like that's your signature style. And it doesn't matter if it's an AICPA town hall and everybody else is wearing a suit, you are wearing your Hawaiian shirt. And I love that.
Yeah, yeah, I always wanted to be genuine, I guess we want to call it there. And so yeah, and again, these guys were that way, and so they were comfortable with, there was a lot of things I asked and a lot of questions we asked, And I always came down to five things that I asked all of them, and none of them could come up. None of these firms could answer all five and satisfy the five. I was in no hurry, so I didn't really care. So it was one of those things that I had all the power and didn't really even know it or realize. I just wasn't interested. And then the five
So
things
what
were,
are the five things? Yeah.
yeah, so basically they had to take care of the team. So that we pay our team on a different way. We pay our team with a variable comp structure. So it's a salary based on national average. Then they get variable comp based on the book of business they're actually managing. And so it eliminated all kinds of biases that we eliminated them 100%. Because if you're if you're in New York City, you're working $1 million book of business, you're making the same amount as I'm making in Fort Wayne, Indiana, or Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Made no difference. If you're white or black, makes no difference. Male or female, makes no difference. It's all based on the effort you're putting in. The more effort in there, the more money you make. So you can control how much you make, which is the nice thing about the variable comp, and which is completely different than a CPA firm where comp's based on tenure. And so that was one thing. The other thing was we don't bill by the hour, and there's no hourly requirement. And so it's all driven by results. And so I don't care if you're working 35 hours a week and managing a $2 million book of business. You're not going to ever hear anything from me. Congratulations on the success of your being able to manage a book versus a typical CPA firm would say, well, if you're working 35 million or 35 hours and doing 2 million, you should be able to do 40 hours and work 2.5
or double
million.
it. Double
Yeah,
it.
or
Work
double it,
70.
yeah. Exactly. And so it's like that was not the way that we had structured it, not the way we wanted to do it. And so the team had to be taken care of, and that went from the very lowest person on our team to our director level. And so again, everybody was in that same bandwidth, which most firms would say no, that's not how we do it, and I can't do it that way. The other thing was we had to be able to run as an independent unit. And so I didn't want to come into Anders and then my marketing gets pushed in their marketing, my tax goes to their tax. And I didn't want that because I knew that wasn't sustainable for our growth. If we were going to grow this from 20 or 10 million to 50 million, which is what the goal was now, I needed to make sure that, hey, we had a unit in place and our marketing team, everything was going solid. The national brand was the third thing because we created a national brand. We didn't want to go back to a local brand, a St. Louis firm, St. Louis brand, super strong brand in St. Louis, maybe not as big a brand nationally, from East Coast to West Coast. We, again, small firm at that point in Fort Wayne, Indiana, bigger brand nationally. And so it was just one of those things I needed to make sure that brand was there. And so that's where the name came in. And I had to agree that, hey, we want to keep the name for at least a 3-year period so that we can really focus or really kind of wean our content marketing down to this new name so that we just didn't pull the plug today and all the effort that we've done for the last 20 years is gone. We didn't want that to happen because that would, in my opinion, happen. And so that national brand was super important. And then the incentive buyout was important. For me, and initially they came in, a lot of firms said, hey, you'll be part of our retirement program. And when you retire, you'll get this big money. It's like, no, that's not how we want to do this. So I came in and said, hey, here's how we're going to do it. I want 60% of the value of the firm day one. And I want that spread over 5 years. I don't want it immediately. And which is kind of weird. Why don't I want it immediately? It's like, well, I didn't want to take my incentive away. If I had millions of dollars in my bank account today, would I be incentivized to continue on? I didn't know. And I didn't want to find out. And so I wanted to make sure that, hey, we're paid on a monthly basis there for the next 60 months based on that 60% of the value of year one. I already knew that we're going to double our size every 3 years. We've always done it. Why wouldn't we do it going forward? We're trending it. We're building that flywheel to really blow that up. And so year 5, I knew that, hey, if we grow it to 50 million, like we think we can, being part of a bigger firm with more opportunities, I thought, wow, that's a bigger payout than selling it at 20 million, 3 years or 2 years from now, 2 or 3 years from now. And I thought, this is a great opportunity. 50 million, 40% of 50 million is a lot bigger, right? And so our second part of the apple there should be a lot larger than the first part, even though it's a different percentage there. And so I thought that's a great incentive for us to really work hard. And the fact that my team, my director team, received phantom stock, and we gave phantom stock to our team a long time ago based on acquisition, it incentivized them to continue on and work hard too, because they saw the same thing. The more that they work, the bigger they build it, the more that they actually make in the process. So it worked out really, really well that everybody was incentivized to really to actually for that same goal, to hit that $50 million eventual mark there. And then the last part was I needed to have a seat at the table, meaning that my partner Adam and I both had to be equity partners. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. We had to be equity partners because I didn't want to jump into a situation and then have them change the rules on me a year from now because I didn't have the ability to veto it or say no. I had some influence on it. At the time, there's only 13 equity partners, so we were 2 of 13, which I thought was very fair in that regard. It at least gave us a seat at the table to have a voice. And those were the 5 main areas. And Andrews said yes. And I was like, shit. now, now what? I wasn't planning on that to happen. And, I was like, wow, this is great. And so I said, yeah, let's have you meet the director team and our two most senior CFOs. And if any one of them says no, then we will stop it there. If they say yes, we'll continue on. And I thought, oh, one of them's going to say no. And they met the team. They met the Anders folks. Oh, this is a great opportunity. We can't pass it up. Let's do it. I see the vision. And it was like, well, dang, now what do I got to do? They met all the requirements. Our team likes it. And I was like, well, okay, let's go ahead and do it. And so within a 6-month process, we had went through that whole due diligence, the valuation, everything, and sold the practice. So it was just one of those things I wasn't expecting it to happen, wasn't looking for it to happen, didn't think it was going to happen. And I was completely fine if it didn't happen, and it did happen, which it's been a great experience so far.
Well, and I think that attitude is clearly why you ended up getting all the answers to your 5 questions, is you weren't willing to compromise on that. And
Yeah,
I've talked to firm owners who didn't get that equity seat at the table, and then later, when the rules changed, they really regretted it.
yeah.
It happens all the time with the smaller firms going into the bigger ones, and so it's awesome you didn't bend on any of that.
No, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, the incentive. I was looking for a reason. I was looking for no, is what I was looking for. I was
Yeah.
looking for no really hard, and I found yes all around the corner, and that was, that's a big no. I mean, equity partner is a big thing that just gives somebody right out of the gate, and
Yeah.
that was just one of those things that I felt so strongly with that. I also put a caveat in there is that. Robert and Dave, the two folks, my two main, I guess if you want to call her who I report to, if either one of them left, I could accelerate the agreement. And so I thought that was super important because I fell in love with these two guys. And it was like, if these two guys are gone, then who knows who's going to replace them? And I was like, I don't know if I want to work for, X, Y, X or Y, type of thing.
This is a great list. I mean, everyone should have those 5 points, 6 points really,
Mm-hmm.
on that. Jody Grunden, it has been fantastic talking to you on this show. Where can people learn more about you, follow you online, and is Summit CPA Anders hiring? Should people interested, where can they go?
Yeah, great question. So we're always hiring because we're growing, which is kind of the cool part. We usually have a really good opportunity. When we hire, we usually have a good pool of people we can actually look from. So yeah, if anybody's looking for a position, whether it's an accounting, CFO, consulting, whatever, always hiring. Definitely reach out. You can reach out to me directly at jody@summitcpa.net. So I still have my old address, and it's .net, not .com. I didn't have the money to spend on .com back then, so I went with .net. Or you can just simply Google me. Really, I mean, if you Google me, you'll probably find me on everything. I'm in YouTube. We do a lot. We do a podcast every week. There's a lot of ways you can get a hold of me. So I would say summitcpa.net is a great starter there for our website, or just simply Google Jody Grunden or Summit CPA Group, and you should be able to you'll see a lot of resources out there.
We'll have a link to your LinkedIn in our show notes, and a link to the Summit CPA website, and links to those podcasts that you mentioned. They're definitely worth listening to. It's so awesome that you're out there putting out all that great content, and a lot of it is on earmark for CPE. So
yes, it is.
Not only this episode that we've done, but like many, many episodes of great podcasts about accounting and virtual CFO services and how to run a remote team. I mean, everything. It's a wealth of knowledge. So
yeah, kind of funny, not to interrupt you there, but it was kind of fun. I was just telling you that gentleman I was talking to for a long time, and we he's like, hey, I finally had to get my CPE, and my assistant got all this information, all these different podcasts for the CPE, and I saw you twice. It was on Earmark. So he's like, oh my
And
gosh.
so, we can't discount the podcasting as like something that led to all these opportunities you had, these interests in acquiring your firm, because you were out there in the public. And so a lot of people knew about you and they knew you were growing, and they might not have if, maybe Anders wouldn't have been talking to you if you hadn't been out there.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So thanks a lot, Jody. Great talking to you. Hope to see you around soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Blake.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you learned something new. And if you did, wouldn't it be nice to get some CPE credit for it? Well, I've got great news. My new app, Earmark CPE, offers free NASBA-approved CPE credits for listening to podcasts, including this one. Visit earmarkcpe.com to download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. That's earmarkcpe.com.